Hello and welcome to the Photography and Video Show podcast. I'm your host, David McClelland, and this month we take a trip to the Fujifilm House of Photography in central London for the first ever photography and video show and SheClicks Women Who Photo Meetup. And while we're there, we speak with photographer Emily Endean about her liberating career transition from real estate insurer to great outdoors photographer.
As I grew up and left school, I kind of fell into the insurance industry, and I was an insurance broker for almost 20 years. And then alongside to that, I was slowly building what was a hobby in photography to something more. I went part-time in my insurance work, and I got to a level that I was able to actually think about changing the industry that I worked in. It went hand in hand with completely changing my life up, and I left my house, left my job, I moved into my van and decided I would go full-time in my photography work.
Also on this month's show, we talk about camera system anniversaries, camera system farewells, and some of the big announcements from Adobe's MAX event in LA. And joining us to pour over the news is photojournalist, writer, curator, and he assures us no relation to Judy, it's Peter Dench. Hello, Peter.
Well, thanks for having me, David. Pleasure to be here.
Now, you and I have crossed paths a number of times, in particular at the photography show, but if there's anyone listening today who hasn't come across you or your work, just tell us a bit about what you do.
Well, according to the taxman, I've been a photographer since 1998. Pretty much honed my craft in editorial. So for over a decade, worked for magazines such as GQ, Marie Claire, Tatler, the broadsheet magazines, Sunday Times, Telegraph. So that was kind of, the bread and butter of my career and where I learned my craft. As you mentioned, I write for Amateur Photographer magazine in particular. I curate where I can, and I run a festival called Photo North. So adding strings to the bow. So you can come at me from any of those angles, and I'm happy to chat about each or all of them.
Well, indeed. And yes, I have a strong hunch. Spoiler alert, I wrote the show notes for this. So yes, I know we're going to be coming at you from several of those angles. So let's take a look at what's been happening in the news over the last month. In the month that Sony celebrated 10 years of its alpha full-frame mirrorless cameras, and that all started with the A7, A7R in October 2013, and as of a few weeks ago now includes the beasts that are the A7C2 and the A7CR. Meanwhile, after, a little more than 10 years, but not much, Canon has killed off its EOS M mirrorless system. Now, as regular guest on the pod, Digital Camera World editor James Artez pointed out, the writing was on the wall for the system ever since the EOS R line debuted in 2018. And, in particular, the recent launches of the APS-C R versions like the R7, R10 and R50. Now, I've spent some really good times with an EOS M over the years, and it's a really solid, versatile, little sounds a bit diminutive, but it's compact for sure camera, and I'm going to be really sad to see them go. Peter, what are you shooting with at the moment? I saw something that you wrote for Amateur Photographer about a recent trip that you took, and actually your choice of camera was really important for you not ending up in some sort of detention on that journey.
Well, that was the headline. But I was fortunate enough to be given an OM system, OM5.
Aha, okay.
And then I suggested that it would make sense if I took the camera on a road trip. And then I just thought, what was the most interesting place to take it within the budget that I had?
Yes.
I had a quick conversation with a writer friend of mine, and he mentioned that a friend of his who's ex-SAS.
This already sounds worrying.
Mentioned that you could fly from London to Moldova, to the capital, and then drive 3.5 hours to Odessa in Ukraine. And it sounded a simple idea, and on that basis, we agreed to go.
Now, Odessa, obviously what's been happening over the last 18 months or more there with a conflict with Russia, Odessa has been quite not necessarily in the front line like some of the east of Ukraine, but even down there on the coast, it has been quite severely scarred, I guess.
Yeah, it's not on the front line. I say it's the left, right, back and frontline, because it's been the recipient of relentless missile attacks since the invasion. And I think it took me about 545 days for me to decide that I had something to say, to add to the visual archive of this extraordinary piece of history. What was being produced on the front lines was being produced so well, I knew I couldn't add to that. And I'm very thankful for the photographers that were doing a great job documenting that situation, so I didn't have to. But when I saw that the beaches, David, had opened in Odessa for the first time, for me, that was of interest. I'm a seaside lad, and it's a familiar sort of environment for me to photograph. So, I finally felt that I had something to add to the visual conversation that was going on.
What was it you were hoping to capture there? Was it the juxtaposition between holiday and horror?
Spot on, I think. It was the title of the reportage I gave it was Sun, Sea and Sandbags. So I wanted to contrast the lust for life, the drive of the residents of Odessa to have a normal existence as possible, but then to contrast that with what they do have to face. If it is on a daily basis, if there's not actually missile strikes coming in, it's still the war rages in your head. And I was only there for 5 days, but the paranoia does build, and what that must be like heading towards 2 years, the stress these people are under, I felt that was worth commenting on. But I was accredited by the Ukrainian military before I went. So I was, I had that protective cloak that a photojournalist needs. So, the camera was on display, the press pass was around my neck, and I felt relatively confident doing my job. But as you kind of alluded to, for parity, I actually wanted to go to Russia, to Crimea, to contrast what was happening there. But logistically, that didn't work out. So the next best thing I could decide to do was go to a place called Transnistria, or the Pridnestrovyan Moldavian Republic.
Right. Okay. So this is the PMR, as it's more conveniently called. This is part of Moldova. How does this work?
It's not internationally recognised by pretty much most of the world, apart from a few other breakaway states. So it claimed independence, I think, in 1992 after a civil war with Moldova. But it's still recognised as part of Moldova, apart from the people in the PMR who recognise it as independent. So it's Russian-backed. There's about 1,500 Russian troops stationed there who act as peacekeepers. It's got the biggest arms depot, I think, in Eastern Europe, which is also, I think, why they're there. So after 5 days in Odessa, I kind of transferred to Moldova. I rested up for a couple of days and then headed into the PMR. And
did you have a press pass for the PMR, Peter?
No, because as far as I could tell, Western press weren't encouraged to go there.
Right.
So what I had to do was shred all my press passes or hide them. But I still had the stamps in the passport, which were a bit of a sore thumb. So I was hoping they wouldn't kind of notice them. And so it's strange, are you over prepared? Are you overthinking it, underthinking it? Was I just being paranoid? For safety, I just hid all the memory cards from Ukraine in the lining of my camera bag. I hid my British press pass. I dressed as touristy as I could. When I went to the border, I was prepared. And I knew you had to show evidence of where you were staying and, how long you wanted to stay. So I answered these questions, and then I was asked by the border guard, if I had a camera. And
okay, what do you do at that point?
And I did. Obviously, it was on my shoulder, in my donkey bag, and they said, is it a professional camera? And of course, I thought, well, what is a professional camera?
Yes.
So these questions kind of raged, and then I just decided this wasn't the time for debate, and he was staring at me for an answer. So I said, I have a camera. And then they asked to look at it because they wanted to see if it was a professional camera. So I just pulled out the OM5 and handed it over. He took it away, showed it to a colleague, and then handed it back with my migration card and waved me through. So
Wow.
I genuinely think that the size and the look of the OM5, because it's quite sort of nostalgic looking, it's quite retro,
Yeah.
possibly saved me from a tricky situation.
I've seen some of your selfies and your pictures from when you were in the PMR, and you were peak tourist looking there. Well done for that for that disguise. I can understand how the OM5 would have slipped under their radar. I'm sure people from OM would say, "Oh no, it's very much a professional camera, or can be used by professionals." And then there's the whole philosophical debate about, well, what is professional that you say was raging on in your brain?
It's definitely a professional camera. I've shot magazine covers with its predecessor, and I have no qualms about using it on the higher end jobs. So yeah, and then while photographing within the PMR over 3 days, it just felt that it was the right tool for that particular environment.
It's always about the right tool for the right job, isn't it? And sometimes if you are doing guerrilla shooting, the more discreet the camera, the more able you are to slip under that radar. And also depending upon your subject as well. And this certainly works from a video point of view. If you turn up to a nervous contributor with a dirty great big ENG camera, lighting and all the rest of that, then you're going to get a very different response, a very different contribution than you are if you're filming on a smartphone or a small mirrorless camera, where it's less intimidating. You're able to have more of an authentic conversation rather than being intimidated by the equipment that goes with that conversation. Where can we see this work? I have seen some of the pictures from this, and they are fascinating and every bit what I would expect from some Peter Dench reportage. Well, where's the best place that people can go and hear this story and see the work?
There's an edit on my personal website, peterdench.com, and the full story on Amateur Photographer magazine website, so you can read, there's 2,000 accompanying words, some pictures there. The whole archive is gone on Getty Images. So yeah, just have a hunt around, and I'm sure a link will pop up on your search engine. And
just to assist that, we'll put a link to that Amateur Photographer story in the show notes, and a link to your website as well. Back to the news for a moment. Something else that's been happening over the last few weeks or so, Adobe MAX. So a lot of creatives, of course, use Adobe products, and it was Adobe's big shindig in LA a couple of weeks ago when it showed off some of the latest features in its Creative Cloud suite of products. Some of our listeners, I know, were out there, lucky you. Many of the rest of us were following it closely from elsewhere in the world. And I get the sense that most of the actual announcements were briefed, leaked, publicly shared well in advance. And of course, Adobe's got a very active beta program, and it sneaks things that it shares at various times of the year as well. So there weren't too many surprises, but just to summarize, lots of AI stuff, of course. We've seen Firefly, which is the name that Adobe gives to its generative AI tools. It's been gradually working its way into Photoshop over the last few months, Illustrator and Express as well. The Firefly image model so there's a few different models that Adobe has with Firefly. So the image model that most people have been playing with, that's got a quality upgrade. I think it's on version 2 now. So you've got even more detailed output and interpretation of your text prompts. Like we've seen other models as well. DALL-E 3 has been hitting the internet recently as well. Not just Photoshop and Illustrator. Of course, lots of photographers swear at sometimes as well. Let's face it, Lightroom, and that's got some subtle maybe AI smarts in there too. So we're looking at a new lens blur tool that lets you create some depth in an image, a bit like the portrait mode stuff that you might see on smartphone cameras. That is coming with some AI goodness to Lightroom as well. You can even customize the type of bokeh in there as well. That's all fun. You've got some HDR stuff, some color stuff as well that might be of interest. I'll put a link to the show notes there as well that covers that Lightroom stuff. But one thing I did want to cover is what's happening with Premiere Pro 24. Lots of little things in this new release, like the timeline performance improvement. If you've used Premiere Pro recently, particularly if you're a Mac and you're on one of the M1, M2 processors, then that timeline at the bottom, it does just swing by. So quite how they've made that 5 times faster is quite spectacular. AI audio cleanup, that looks useful. looks a bit similar to what is in Audition already with some of the improved workflows there. But the headline is this text-based editing feature set. So what Premiere Pro has done now. Let's say that you've got an interview sequence that you're editing. So the first thing is Premiere Pro will transcribe the audio from your interview assets. That's using a bit of machine learning stuff. It's already been doing that, so there's nothing too smart there. And then you've got this transcription panel where you select the text you want from your source footage. And at this point, you're kind of editing video like you would a Word document. And in the source monitor, you're used to selecting your in, out, and then using your comma or your full stop to drop your select onto the main timeline. You're doing that with words at the moment, which is quite smart. And this helps you to create basically a rough cut, quite a jumpy rough cut of your interview because it's transcribed. It can spot the filler words, the ums and the ers. It can spot the big pauses and cut all of those out. That's not the final finished piece, and you would want to move it around, add B-roll, add cutaways, and all the rest of that stuff. But that's a real time saver. And I think that this new workflow, let's face it, will be very familiar to some people who've used other tools out there. Things like Riverside FM, and Descript are the big examples here, where you're moving around from dragging waveforms, dragging still images or whatever it is, to actually looking at the words. And that's how we often read words, of course, and it's much of a faster workflow to work like that. And in fact, I've moved over to using word-based editing for this podcast. We're an audio-only podcast, but it would work fairly well, I think, as well with video, because it's just a much faster workflow.
I'm starting to doubt that I'm actually talking to a person here, David. I need proof you're not a bot. To be honest, I wasn't sure what you were talking about for the last 5 minutes. So
I see. Okay.
An idea of how much I engage with new technologies and AI in particular. I don't actively use it or consciously use it, but I know I am. It must be in the cameras that I use, the face recognition or that kind of thing. And I know it's creeping into Lightroom or romping in, but it sits uncomfortably with me, coming at it as a photojournalist, the manipulation of pictures. I know Getty have put out a statement about content submissions and, working their way around the questions of AI. So I keep an eye on it. And I've kind of dabbled with apps that will transcribe interviews for me. I don't know whether that comes under AI. I'm assuming it.
Yeah, it does. AI is this massive umbrella of different technologies, and I think the transcription often comes under machine learning.
Yeah, and I don't like it. You mentioned you can edit out the ums and the ers, and I find if I'm transcribing an interview, those ums and ers are important. Because you get a feel for how the person is feeling and what their mood is, and these pauses I think are given a lot of information. And sometimes when I'm recording an interview, I'm not listening to the interview as hard as I should because I'm thinking of the next question. And then going back and painstakingly transcribing it raises more questions, and it almost helps me write the piece as I'm listening back.
It's part of your creative process.
Yeah, and by the end of the transcription, I've pretty much written it in my head. And so to hand that over to AI just makes me jittery. Will it, all those sort of nuances of the interview could get smoothed out or edited out or dumped and lost. And then this is why I've never had a tennis coach, David, because I like the idiosyncrasies.
Hang on, where's this going? Hang on.
Because they coach out all the idiosyncrasies of your game, and then you're just left with a whole club full of people who play the same way. And I like the disruption and the uniqueness of original content.
But I think this brings you back to the point that you were making a moment ago about the tennis. If what as individuals, as humans, frankly, we're able to do is to remain individual, not to become part of a homogeneous mass of averages, which AI may well be able to create. That is what helps us to stand out. It is that individuality. But going back to Getty, I saw a news story only yesterday as we're recording. Shutterstock will now let you transform real photos using AI. So you'll be able to edit images from its library using an AI. And it says that it will compensate artists if their images are licensed after they're edited with AI. So I have spoken with stock libraries over the last couple of years about the existential threat in some ways that generative AI will pose to certain parts of their business model. So I think it's very interesting that Shutterstock is taking a step there.
Sorry, you're in talking to stock libraries. You're so committed. That's what you do in your spare time for fun.
Just one of the conversations, one of the many conversations that I have with different people around the industry. And the other thing, going back to the ethics piece, and you mentioned your role as a photojournalist and proving the authenticity, the actuality of the images that have been taken and whether there are fake news, manipulated images that are getting in there. Leica's latest camera encrypts verification info into every photo was the headline I also saw yesterday on The Verge. I'm sure that's been reported elsewhere as well. And it's the M11P that uses Adobe's Content Authenticity Initiative to cryptographically sign each image. But I think it's interesting to see camera manufacturers, obviously Adobe very much in the middle of imagery there as well, doing what they can quite early on to open up that conversation and to put some measures in place to try and ensure the veracity of the images that are being captured. Very important as a photojournalist like yourself, Peter.
Well done, Leica, doing what they've consistently done throughout their history. Pioneering and understanding and adapting and learning what needs to be done. So yeah, I applaud this move.
It's $9,000 camera, so I hope that technology trickles down to other cameras that photojournalists of all flavors of camera will be able to benefit from in due course.
I didn't see the price.
I'll put a link to all of those stories in the show notes. Right then, time now to head over to Covent Garden in London, England, where a couple of weeks ago the photography and video show and SheClicks held the first ever Women Who Photo meetup.
Perfect.
And we're here at the House of Photography. It's a fantastic venue. What's going to be happening here today?
You're right, it really is a great venue, and we're meeting to get photographs of members of SheClicks to just show, women enjoying photography, posing with their cameras, having a bit of fun, just to promote the idea that, there are women who are interested in photography as well as men.
And what's going to be happening with these photographs once they're taken?
Well, they're going to be used at the photography show. I think they're going to be displayed on screens, but we'll also be using them in the run-up to the show to promote it and to try and encourage more women to join in.
We have dozens of women in photography just waiting outside in the holding area right now. They're all going to be coming in here into the studio in a few moments. It is a fantastic community that you've got here, and a really engaged community as well. How long has it taken you to build up to this level of engagement, to this number of people?
Well, we started in 2018 and it grew very quickly. Within just a few months we got to 1,000, and I think there's always been a good level of engagement. But I have to be honest, actually, when the pandemic hit and we were all in lockdown, that's when the group really gelled online, and we started doing more sort of virtual coffee mornings and meetups and stuff like that online. And then as soon as we were able to meet up again in person, there was so much enthusiasm for getting out and meeting people and chatting. And the very first meetup we had after the lockdown, we went to RHS Wisley, and there weren't a huge number of us because obviously still people were a bit nervous and had to be careful about numbers. But we sat down and we chatted for 2 hours, just about everything, and everyone went home absolutely exhausted and, really inspired, because we also went around together taking photographs. So there's always been that level of engagement, but every time you have a meetup, another person comes along and somebody else joins, and then they hear about it, and, it just grows and grows and grows, and it's just sort of snowballed, really, I suppose.
Who is it you have here today taking the portraits?
We're very lucky today. We've got Emily Endean, who is a Fujifilm ambassador, or ex-photographer, as they call them, with an X rather than EX. And she's been doing a really great job. It's great fun to have her here.
one, go. Perfect.
Let's twinge some
My photography kind of falls into many genres, I feel. My passion is landscapes and seascapes. Just being outdoors in nature was always my passion. So any photography that I can kind of bring into that realm. So I go out and shoot land and sea just for me, but then I also shoot portraits in those environments. Now I work with a lot of brands doing commercial kind of lifestyle photography out in nature as well. So whether that's outdoor adventure wear or shoes or I don't know, sunglasses, there's so many things that I can take out into that element to photograph, and those kind of things have just organically happened over the years and just kind of, I don't know, multi-genres, I guess.
Does your work have a flavour or a feel? Do your clients come to you because they feel as though they're going to get a texture with your work, do you think?
Yeah, I do. I'm always chasing great light, so I always feel like I'll try and show things in the best light or in the best conditions. So I think because of my passion for landscapes, I'm very good at kind of reading the forecast or knowing what moments the light's going to break through. And I mean, it's a bit unpredictable, isn't it? But it's being ready for that moment. So I think a lot of what I do is based around chasing those moments of great light. And I hope that comes through. I think that comes through in my work.
And your journey towards being a photographer, that wasn't what you did when you first entered the working world. There was a moment or a period of time over which you chose to move in and become ultimately where you are now, which is a full-time photography first person. Briefly describe that journey.
So I always loved photography. So even as a small child, I had a little film camera that I used to take photos of my family and things. So I always had that passion there. But yeah, as I grew up and left school, I kind of fell into the insurance industry, and I was an insurance broker for almost 20 years. And then alongside to that, I was slowly building what was a hobby in photography to something more. And it gradually became something more. And I went part-time in my insurance work to try and explore it, if I could do extra days pushing my photography. And I think just by practicing your art over and over is how you improve, and I got to a level that I was able to actually think about changing the industry that I worked in. It went hand in hand with completely changing my life up, and I left my house, left my job, I moved into my van and decided I would go full-time in my photography work. So this is going back about 1.5 years ago.
It's interesting to me, the decision to change not only how you work, but also how you live. Moving into the van, for example, that's a real physical manifestation of following a passion. You're able to literally follow your passion around the great outdoors.
Yeah, and I think especially because the idea was roughly 2 years ago, I became an ambassador with Fujifilm. And the kind of arrangement is that I can travel and do talks for them at different places, or I can take kit and try it out in different places. So I took the XT5 to Scotland not long before it was launched, so that I could get some test shots and get some content that they could use for the launch. So there's all these little things that kind of came together that I thought by hitting the road and being able to say yes to anything and travel anywhere, that was broadening my horizons to open myself up to more opportunity. And I think that was important, because looking back to living in a house and all the expenses that go with it, and I was in a well-paid insurance job, there's always then going to be the fear of taking that leap and actually doing something different, and you don't know how that's going to go. So I think by doing both at the same time, it just worked.
If there's any industry where you're able to make an assessment of risk when you're moving into a new career, surely the insurance industry where you're coming from is one of those. But I'm sure that there must have been that fear that, am I making the right decision? And is that why you did the part-time thing first of all? Were you kind of easing yourself in to see how it felt, whether you felt as though economically as well as from a kind of passion point of view, this was the right move for you?
Yeah, I think by easing myself in made things feel much more of a gentle process, because looking back, like I say, it began as a hobby with my photography. So I never really saw myself as being good enough. I would compare myself with other people that were doing full-time professional photography, and I would compare myself and always think, I'm not quite at that level. And I think by taking the opportunity to go part-time in my day job and dabble a bit more in the world of photography, I got to do more and more without, in my mind, thinking, I'm making this big leap and it being scary. It felt like a more natural process, that when I did go completely full-time, it didn't feel so scary. And I think because I was building up my photography business and I was getting more and more work, after 2 or 3 years of doing it part-time, it felt like the right time that actually I could afford to do it a little bit more, and there was more work coming in at that point.
And the roller coaster has led you to where we are here today at the incredible facility that they have here in central London, Fujifilm. And you've been taking portraits today of dozens upon dozens of female photographers as part of the photography and video show and SheClicks Women in Photography meetup.
But it's been a really interesting one because I don't normally shoot with artificial lighting. I don't normally shoot in the studio. So for me to come along, I just felt like this is a huge honour to be part of a campaign, to be able to capture the portraits of women in photography and really highlight the visibility in the run-up to the photography show.
How important do you think those support networks, these communities are, particularly for people who maybe, like yourself, didn't start off in photography but are following a passion, are following a need to do something professionally and maybe looking at making a move into the industry later on in their working lives?
I think community is really important for many reasons, but you can learn from each other and you can get support from each other because you can feel alone. Like I mentioned, I got to a point where I wasn't sure whether I was good enough, and I think having a support network around you to reassure you that you are doing well and everyone's there for you, and no one's against you, everyone's rooting for you, everybody wants you to do well. Just being able to learn from each other and pick up tips along the way. Like today I'm doing the photography, but there's so many other people getting involved and taking photos too, and it's just a really nice feeling, like everyone's learning something and getting involved. It's really good.
Well, I'm really looking forward to seeing the output on social media and elsewhere over the next few months. Thank you for taking time out of what is a really busy day.
Yeah, thank you so much. I can't wait to see how it all comes together as well. Really looking forward to being at the show.
This is my first meetup and I'm inspired. I'm actually motivated. I hope I'm going to take some names and hopefully we'll meet up in future.
It's the second time I've been to a SheClicks meetup, and it was good fun the first time, and I thought I'd try this. I'm not a portrait photographer, nor do I like to have my photograph taken normally, so I've challenged myself to do this, and it's just great to meet up with other female photographers who I can learn from, because I'm an amateur, not a professional, and there are lots of people with lots more experience than me.
It's been great. It's been really lovely to meet some other women photographers and learn and see the expert in action.
What a busy morning it's been. What have you made of it? What have the other members of SheClicks made of it?
Well, firstly, it's been great fun. I think everyone's got a profile picture that they're going to be really pleased with. We got some fun group shots. Everyone was engaged from the moment we started. Because you never really know how these things are going to go. You think, it'll be great fun, blah, blah, blah. And, you say, right, do you want to have your photograph taken? That first person says, okay, and just takes that plunge forward and has a few photos taken. Then the groups, and then we all started doing a bit of dressing up with hats and scarves and silly glasses and stuff like that. And I think the most important thing is everyone's had a really great time.
Something that we've been chatting about today as well is about women role models in photography and how that tide, we hope, is turning, and that, Emily chatting about the work that she does at universities and inspiring young people as well, that she will be an inspiring woman in photography, and many of the people, including yourself, that we're seeing here today will also hopefully inspire people in the future too.
Thank you. I'm sure Emily will inspire lots and lots of people. She always inspires me with her amazing photography, so it's really, really delightful to have her here today.
So I might need you to squeeze in a bit more.
Right, is everybody ready? Hey.
1, 2, 3.
SheClicks!
And a big thanks to Emily Endean and Angela from SheClicks, and of course to everybody who came along to what was a fantastically enjoyable day. Peter, alongside the photojournalist assignments, writing works, trips to war-torn states and so on, you somehow also find time to curate a festival. Tell us about Photo North.
Photo North. I feel a bit like the Nicolas Cage character in Leaving Las Vegas. I can't quite remember or pinpoint why I'm doing Photo North, but I know that it has to be done. When I made that decision to do it, it was the right one. Thinking back, the first one was in 2018, and I'm based in London. I get to see a lot of exhibitions, visit a lot of photographers, and what I started to notice was, after a short run, the exhibitions that are often created at considerable personal expense to the photographers would then go into storage on top of the wardrobe or under the beds. And I also feel that people were reluctant to travel large distances to see exhibitions, because again, that's cost, and everything was becoming more localized. What I was looking for was an opportunity to grab exhibitions that had come to the end of their run, or they were coming to the end of their life, and give them a new home, give them a new audience, upcycle them. So Photo North was a kind of response to that. And my sister-in-law, Sharon Price, who is the co-founder of Photo North, she was based in Harrogate.
That's pretty north.
That's pretty north. We ran a gallery together in Leeds around 2010, 2011, called White Cloth Gallery. And we ran that for 3 years. So we'd been looking for another opportunity to host, an event. And Photo North came out of that. So we're now heading towards Photo North 5. So the first 2 were in Harrogate, then we moved it to Manchester, and this year's festival was in Leeds, and the people of Leeds welcomed us, responded well to us, so we're going to keep it there for next year. So, you say it's where do I find the time, but we have a good team. We rely on a lot of goodwill, so we kind of just nudge things in the right direction. Usually a Friday, Saturday, Sunday, round about 12 exhibitions across 80 to 100 metres of hanging space. Right. We try and have a programme of talks, a market area, which is sort of supposed to be a good vibe, of zines, books. We want people to feel comfortable, nourished, inspired and involved.
So, and that's what I wanted to tune into, really, was the difference in the vibe between London, where you're based, and exhibitions, festivals that you'll be very familiar with having been part of as a contributor or as a visitor. How different is the vibe at Photo North? You say it's more accessible, friendlier?
I'd hope so. You'd have to ask the people that come, but we try and, have world-renowned or established photographers exhibit, and then emerging, up-and-coming, or even students. So part of our ethos is to do that. So the emerging photographers can then say they exhibited alongside Chris Floyd or Tom Stoddard or whoever, So we want to be a place without ego. We're professional, but we like to be informal. And April next year, we're at the Carriage Works Theatre in Millennium Square, which is a 10-minute walk from the train station. And there's a big student community there, which is important to us.
What do you get from the curation? What boxes does it tick for Peter? Creating these events, you must feel as though you are contributing to something, helping something. What is it?
I mean, all I know is, say I'm 51 now, but when I turned 40, I realised that my competition wasn't going away photographically, and they were actually doing good work. And I'm comfortable enough with my position in the industry now to be able to kind of reach out. And these are collaborative times, David. What have you got that I need? What have I got that you can utilise? I get a lot of joy from doing that, from curating, from giving people a leg up, allowing them a space to show new work. Again, it just feels like the right thing to do. We're not sure what the goal is, but we're enjoying the journey. And we've got Channel 4 involved now.
Recently moved to Leeds as well, I guess.
At the previous festival and at the next one, they're going to have a drop-in clinic where you can go in and show your portfolio. And they'll kind of host an event that will guide you how to break into that industry, how to become an on-set photographer, or how to photograph campaigns for their shows.
Speaking of students and their role, you have a pop-up event taking place also in the north, in Sheffield, later on in November too. Tell us about that.
Yeah, well, Photo North Festival is our kind of showpiece event, but there are add-ons to the business. So we can provide pop-up events in your hotel, in your corporate boardroom, your school, wherever. And this particular event on the 16th of November is at the Park Hill complex, which is the iconic flats in Sheffield, many of which have been turned into student accommodation. So we've got one evening where we've got a photographer called Richard Davis coming to give a talk. We've invited the Sheffield Modernist Society to come in and give a short presentation. There's a Stephen Marland of Modern Mooch will be providing a talk that supports the Modernist Society photographs. So again, it's kind of trying to take this and put it in an environment of students where they can engage, get involved. There's always a bar, some nibbles. But we also ran a student competition. The winners of that will go on display for a month to 2 months in the premises as well.
Tell me, if people want to engage with Photo North, accept a leg up, as you put it, what's the best way of them doing that?
Just visit our website, which is Photo North Festival, I think, or our Facebook page. But we don't lock down the program. The next one is in 6 months, and we're still juggling what to show because we have to grab available exhibitions. We don't lock down the final content until probably 2 months before, because someone might have a book out or things pop up. So bear with us.
We will put a link to the Photo North Festival in our show notes. And whether you're listening to us right at the beginning of November or because of the magic of podcasts at some point in the future, then do go over there and take a look. Right, that is pretty much all that we have time for today, but we will be back on the first Thursday of next month for more. A reminder that the in-person photography and video show takes place at the National Exhibition Centre in Birmingham, England, from the 16th to the 19th of March 2024. All of your favourite brands will be there, from Canon and Nikon to Sony and OM, Fujifilm to Panasonic, and many, many more besides. And among the amazing professionals we have speaking at the show this year, there's some Peter Dench fella speaking about giving plenty of notice for people talking at the show.
I'll be there. And the photography show have been very helpful in helping advise and develop Photo North in various ways as well. So yeah, it's that's why we come after the photography show.
Bless you. Well, I look forward to seeing you at the photography show and catching up, maybe having a chat there about what you've been up to. And also, I'm in the Midlands. I am regularly up in Leeds with work. So, I hope to see you there. If you like what we do here, then please do hit subscribe. Give us a review. We've been climbing the podcast charts all around the world over the last month or so. Hello to you if you're listening in Iceland, Cyprus and Ireland, by the way. Hi there. We'd love your help to spread the word even further and help even more people to find our little show. Do drop us a line at the photography show at futurenet.com, on email, on Instagram at the photography show, and on the platform formerly known as Twitter at UK Photo Show. Peter, it's been an absolute privilege to have you on the show this month. Where can people tune into you and your work online?
Just head to the website, peterdench.com, Facebook, Instagram, I'm at Dench Photo.
Thank you again for joining us, and thank you all for listening in too. See you next time. Bye-bye.